So UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Hill is coming up this weekend, and I'm going to be giving you guys my final predictions. I believe my first early predictions was before I went away on a little bit of a holiday back home, because as you guys know, I do study away from home, so I did fly back home for the weekend, and now I'm back to give my final picks and predictions for the card. A couple of fights have changed. There was a late notice replacement that I believe just wasn't on Tapology at the time of me recording the video, and I'll talk about that then. And there's not really too much else to talk about before we get into it. Obviously, you do have my 125% sign-up bonus to BetUS there. You've got my We Want Pick stuff over there. And also, on top of that, I actually did make a video. In my opinion, it's a pretty good video about Road to UFC. If you don't know what Road to UFC is, it is an upcoming UFC tournament that takes place next week. There's no UFC fight card on next week, but the Road to UFC tournament is. So I definitely do recommend that you watch the Road to UFC tournament. If you want to know more about it, I will kind of have coming up on the screen probably somewhere in the video over there the thumbnail to that video, and I will put it in the pinned comment as well. I think it's a great video, but now let's not waste too much more time on that intro. Let's talk about Takashi Sato taking on Themba Gorimbo. My pick has changed. I'm picking Themba Gorimbo now. I don't trust Sato. I rewatched Themba Gorimbo's fight against AJ Fletcher. It's not the best look in the world, but he did actually go out and offensively wrestle and offensive grapple, against AJ Fletcher. But his defensive grappling was not too good. AJ Fletcher was kind of able to reverse him and then control the fight from there. But if Themba Gorimbo is going to offensively grapple against AJ Fletcher, he is definitely going to offensively grapple against Takashi Sato. And if he does that, he will have a lot more success grappling against Sato than he will against AJ Fletcher, who AJ Fletcher is a pretty good wrestler. And on top of that, he is a pretty good grappler as well. Whereas Themba Gorimbo, he's a good grappler. He's a good offensive grappler. Defensively, not so much. And he was kind of showing in that AJ Fletcher fight. But it kind of did give me an idea that Gorimbo was going to grapple in this matchup, because if he grapples Fletcher, he's going to grapple Sato. You know what I mean? And Takashi Sato, he's a good striker, but he seems to be a little bit low volume. He is pretty technical. He's a very technical striker as well, and he does have some pretty fun fights. He did recently get the KO over Jason Witt, and by recently, about 3 years ago, and since then he has not won. He lost to Miguel Baeza by submission. He just defended against Gunnar Nelson, which was so impressive, and I am going to be picking Gorimbo here. I'm going to pick Gorimbo probably by submission or decision. I mean, Gorimbo is a very offensive fighter. His defense does lack, and I feel like Sato also kind of does lack a little bit of defense on the ground. So I think maybe Gorimbo could exploit that for a submission or a decision. I believe Gorimbo is a slight underdog at the moment, but I do think that he should be able to win, and that is a pick that has changed. A pick that definitely will not change is Victoria Leonardo versus Natalia Silva. I'm pretty confident in Natalia Silva here. Fun little fact about me, though, that I am willing to admit, while you can literally see my breath, it is so cold in my room right now. You can literally see it, you know, like on a cold morning, and you can kind of look like you're vaping, like, I can literally do that right now in my bedroom. It is, I'm not in a warm house, and I'm not in a warm sort of area of the world, but let's move on. Natalia Silva versus Victoria Leonardo. I mean, I've got Silva here. She should be able to finish Victoria Leonardo as well. She was able to finish Teresa Blader, who in my opinion is a really, really good fighter, and was potentially winning that fight until she did get knocked out, but she did gas out before that. And then she just put the pace on Jasmine de Souda-Vicious, kept the fight on the feet, and just dominated her on the feet. Very good performance there. Victoria Leonardo's only path to victory is to control this fight in the clinch. And if Jasmine de Souda-Vicious wasn't able to out-wrestle and wasn't able to control Natalia Silva, Victoria Leonardo 100% will not be able to do that. And I think Silva's just going to pick her apart with high volume and just smack her up on the feet. I think she might even be able to get a finish. Maybe just overwhelm Leonardo with volume and get like a standing TKO. Or maybe she can knock her down at some point in the fight. I think Silva gets the finish by KO, and I think she should be able to get it done. The next one is Chase Hooper versus Nick Fiore. I originally was on Nick Fiore. I'm still on Nick Fiore here, and my confidence kind of goes up in Fiore. Fiore is a grappler that does train at New England Cartel. Sorry, I just misclicked there. And he's not that good at striking, right? He's not that good at striking for a guy that does come out of New England Cartel, which is where Rob Font trains, and also Calvin Kattar, who have fantastic boxing. Nick Fiore doesn't really have that fantastic boxing, but it does tell you that he is still getting good boxing training, right? He still is training around guys that are great strikers that will be able to build on his striking skill set, make him a better striker. And against Chase Hooper, that's probably all you need. All you really need to do against Chase Hooper, it was kind of brutally exposed by Steve Garcia. that all you've got to do is kind of run forward and just pressure him and land. I mean, Steve Garcia absolutely dominated Chase Hooper in that matchup. You know, he got knocked down like 3 times in not very long period of time. It was bad. Chase Hooper looked like he had no idea what he was doing. And I think Nick Fiore can kind of follow that game plan. Do I think he can have the same success in that game plan? Probably not. But it is worth noting Chase Hooper's moving up to 155 as well. He was pretty big at 145, but I don't think moving up a weight class really is the solution for him, especially at 155. And 155, if he can get past Nick Fiore, that's a tough division to be in. And I think Nick Fiore, you know, he's a good grappler. I've seen some people say that Nick Fiore will be able to out-grapple Chase Hooper. I'm not fully convinced, but I am convinced that Nick Fiore will be able to beat Chase Hooper up on the feet. And even if Chase Hooper gets the fight to the ground, Fiore should be able to kind of get out of bad positions that Hooper might put him in. Fiore has never fought anyone that great in his career until he did run up to Mateusz Rebecki. But he still showed like a lot of toughness in that fight. He showed a lot of ability to get through adversity. Do I think Chase Hooper could put Nick Fiore in the same amount of adversity Rebecki did? Probably not. So I am going to go with Fiore to kind of go through this fight. I don't think it goes the distance. I do think at some point Fiore probably will land something, and Chase Hooper will probably just crumble under the pressure and just under the strikes of Fiore. So I think Chase Hooper probably gets TKO'd in this matchup. I'm not looking forward to this one. Ilir Latifi versus Rodrigo Nascimento. It's not going to be a good fight, guys. It's going to kind of suck. Ilir Latifi fights, they're not that good in general, especially if he's winning, because the way that he wins is he just wrestles, he takes people down, and then he controls them. And then Rodrigo Nascimento, kind of the same sort of thing in a way. You know, he did that against Tanabosa, arguably lost. I mean, there's an argument there. Tanabosa was a lot more upset about the decision than I think he probably should have been. And then, you know, I think he beat Alain Baudot, but he was on the sauce. And if he's on the sauce, he should be able to beat Ilir Latifi. But if he's not on the sauce, it might be a little bit more interesting. But Nascimento is a good grappler himself. He's a decent striker. He probably should be able to outstrike Ilir Latifi, who is not the worst striker in the world. But as I said, he's the wrestler. He's purely a wrestler for the most part. And I think Nascimento should be able to kind of beat that game plan. I think Nascimento will probably be able to outstrike Ilir Latifi on the feet. Maybe he could get Ilir Latifi down. I don't really know for sure, but I'm picking Nascimento by a sloppy, boring, terrible, not technical heavyweight decision, and it's going to be a pretty bad fight. We move on. Orion Cosce versus Gilbert Urbina. This could have the makings of a fun fight. Both guys, they're pretty offensive. Both got good offense. They both don't have the best defense. But the most important thing that makes a good fight is they both like to throw volume on the feet, and they both like to be offensive. I mean, Cosce probably more offensive in the wrestling, but he is a good wrestler, and he is pretty athletic as well. His gas tank kind of has let him down in the past, but he is still in the UFC, unlike his brother, Louis Cosce, who I believe is fighting on the regional scene now. But with a couple of good wins, he can probably find his way back. But I don't really know why I brought that up. But anyway, he lost to Philip Rowe, and Philip Rowe is fighting number 11th ranked Neil Magny in his next fight. So you can't really shame him too much for that. I mean, he beat Blood Diamond. Did he look that good in that fight? No, but he did at moments outstrike Blood Diamond on the feet, which is somewhat impressive in itself. Aside from that, don't really have too much to say about Cosce. Very good offensive wrestler, very good offensively, but he can kind of gas out. And Gilbert Urbina, kind of the same. I would say Cosce probably does have better wrestling than Gilbert Urbina. And Gilbert Urbina kind of, I mean, he was on The Ultimate Fighter, and The Ultimate Fighter just unfortunately hasn't been producing the same prospects as it has in the past. You know, because I feel like now everyone kind of knows all the good prospects, and all the good prospects that aren't in the UFC are kind of locked into exclusive contracts, probably regionally and internationally as well. But anyway, man, that's a weird tangent I've gone on both of these for these fights. I do think that Cosce does beat Urbina, but it should be a good war. I mean, Urbina hasn't fought in a long time. I did mention this as well. Urbina could look like a completely different fighter, because he is fighting at 170 now, but on top of that, he hasn't fought in a year and a half. So he's probably taken a lot of time off and really improved on his skill set, especially if he's training full time. I really do think Urbina could have made absolutely rapid improvements in 18 months. But you can't just pick a fighter based on the fact that you think that they're going to make rapid improvements. I'm going to pick Cosce. It should be a good fight, though. Should be able to out-wrestle Urbina. Not a fight to put your money on, in my opinion. I think Chase Hooper versus Nick Fiore is also a fight to not put your money on. There's a lot of them, including this one as well. I don't think you should be putting your money on Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Vanessa Demopoulus either. I am on the Karolina Kowalkiewicz side, my kind of initial prediction, which I did do last week without too much research, was Kowalkiewicz, but it mainly is because I just don't like Vanessa Demopoulus. I think she's really irritating, and it annoys me even more because the UFC seem to try and think that they should be able to promote her, but she's got a really annoying voice and she's got the personality of a 5-year-old. It is unbearable. But I do actually think she loses this fight. I do think Karolina Kowalkiewicz is a much better striker than Vanessa Demopoulus. I don't think it's close. I mean, I thought that Junyu Frey beat Vanessa Demopoulus on the feet, and Junyu Frey's a pretty bad striker. And on top of that, Junyu Frey, I believe it was Poliana Viana, just knocked out Junyu Frey in like 40 seconds in her last fight. So, yeah, that's not a good look, in my opinion, at all. And then she did go on to beat Maria Oliveira, but Maria Oliveira did have moments later on into that fight. But Kowalkiewicz, I think Kowalkiewicz can outstrike Demopoulus. I think she can keep the fight on the feet, and I think she can smack up Demopoulus. Kowalkiewicz's grappling isn't even that bad either, and that's where Demopoulus does want the fight to go to the ground. I can just see Kowalkiewicz just outstriking Demopoulus because they're both old. You know, Demopoulus is almost 35. Kowalkiewicz is almost 38. I believe she was rumoured to retire about 2 years ago, but she's still out here doing it. But I don't think that should really stop her from winning this fight. I think Kowalkiewicz wins a decision. Definitely don't bet on it. Shouldn't be a fight to bet on, that's for sure. The next one is Maheshate versus Viacheslav Borshchev. I am the Viacheslav Borshchev expert, in my opinion. Take that with a grain of salt, that's my opinion. But for Dana White's Contender Series fight, I genuinely couldn't understand why a 4-1 fighter was on Dana White's Contender Series against the 7-0 Chris Duncan. And I do believe I ended up picking Chris Duncan, but I did think that the fight was going to be very close. And it was close, except Borshchev knocked him out. So, good for Borshchev, but what I did discover when I did my research on Borshchev is he's a K1 kickboxing champion, 2012 to 2013 I believe, 15-2 professional kickboxing record. I believe he's a boxing and kickboxing national amateur Russia champion, and he's also got over 200 amateur kickboxing fights. This guy has a fantastic striking pedigree, and it does show up in his fights. It really does. He does look incredible on the feet. You know, he knocked out Dakota Bush with a body shot. We didn't knock him out, TKO'd him, but he did knock out Chris Duncan. And then he did go on to lose to Mark Diakese and Mike Davis, showing some pretty horrendous takedown defense that didn't really seem to improve that much. Now, training at Team Alpha Male, I kind of do expect some pretty rapid improvements in that takedown defense, and we just haven't really seen it yet. I do hope that it's something he's working on. I do hope it's something that he's improving on, because if he can keep these fights on the feet, Viacheslav Borshchev could definitely be a guy to watch out for, because he does have fantastic striking. Someone who he doesn't actually have to worry about the grappling and wrestling is Maheshate. But if you do look into Maheshate a little bit, he actually does have a Greco-Roman wrestling background. We just haven't seen it in the UFC, and we just haven't really seen it in MMA too much. I mean, on those regional fights, which you can't really find at all. There's not a lot of information on him. You can find a little bit if you do search his name. I believe that is Mandarin, and you can kind of find a couple of things, but there's not really too much to find. And even then, these fights, you know, you can't really take too much from them, because he's beating and losing to guys that have losing records, right? But he does have a Greco-Roman wrestling background. We haven't seen it in the UFC. I don't think we saw it in Contender Series as well. And in that fight, he went through a lot of adversity and then come back to win the last 2 rounds, and it was a great performance. He knocked out Steve Garcia, showed good takedown defense in that one fight, I guess, because I think Garcia went for 1 takedown. And he knocked him out. It was a great showing. And then against Rafa Garcia, that was also not the worst showing in the world, but Garcia did win that fight for sure. This is going to be a good fight. It's going to be a fight that I think is going to take place on the feet for the whole fight. I don't really see Maheshate going for wrestling against Borshchev, but even then, I don't really know if Maheshate has the wrestling of Mike Davis or Mark Diakese. I know Mark Diakese, you might think he's a Muay Thai striker. All of a sudden, he just become D1 Diakese, but I'm still going with Borshchev. I think in a pure striking matchup, which is what this one is, I think Borshchev would be the better striker. So I do believe that Viacheslav Borshchev should be able to win this fight. We now move on to Michael Johnson versus Diego Ferreira. And I genuinely believe that Michael Johnson is going to go on a title. No, just kidding. But I think Michael Johnson does win this fight. I mean, I wasn't so confident about it before, but my confidence is rising a little bit, man. I think Michael Johnson's a live underdog in this fight. And if he beats Diego Ferreira, that is a legitimate win. And if he does beat Diego Ferreira and then maybe someone else, he probably could be looking at ranked opponents again, you know, because Diego Ferreira is probably just outside the rankings. I believe at one point he was in the top 10, and then he did lose to Beneil Dariush in a close fight. Styles do make fights though, and then Gregor Gillespie did beat him, and then once again, he did lose to Mateusz Gamrot, but I mean, these are good guys. These are guys that Michael Johnson wouldn't beat, right? These guys would all beat Michael Johnson. I think we can all agree on that. But I do believe that Michael Johnson beats Diego Ferreira. Diego Ferreira is a fantastic grappler. He does have great grappling. He did submit Anthony Pettis, but it was a long time ago. Ferreira's been injured. He's been spending time away. It's just one of those fights, man, where I do believe Michael Johnson can keep the fight on the feet. And if Michael Johnson keeps the fight on the feet, I think he's the better striker. I thought he beat Jamie Mullarkey in that fight. I thought he won the first round, which I believe is the round that the judges were split on. He knocked down Jamie Mullarkey and did more damage. Mullarkey did knock him down himself, but MJ won that round. MJ won that fight. I think he was robbed. It wasn't really robbery, it was a close fight, sorry, but I do think MJ should have won. And then he beat Mark Diakase. Mark Diakase was kind of like making a mockery out of the opponents that he was fighting, like Viacheslav, Borshchev, and then Demir Hadzovic. Are they good fighters? Not really. I mean, I think Borshchev is great, but is he a good wrestler? Absolutely not. Same sort of thing with Demir Hadzovic. And Diakase was out here dominating these guys. And then Michael Johnson just kind of outclassed Diakase and just showed him levels. He really did. He showed him levels in that fight. I think he can defend the takedowns from Ferreira. I think he can keep the fight on the feet against Ferreira. And I think he can outbox him. I think he can beat him up on the feet. I like Johnson in this fight. I don't really know if I like him by KO, but I think there's a good chance he might be able to do it, right? I like Johnson. I like Johnson in this fight. Now we move on to Andre Fialho taking on Joaquin Buckley. I think that Joaquin Buckley does win this fight. Andre Fialho's durability does concern me quite a bit, actually. He fought 9 times in 2 years, and that's going to do something to you, man. I do believe maybe all of the weight cutting that he was doing potentially did have an effect on his durability over time, and that is why he did get, he got KO'd by Jake Matthews, and he got KO'd again by Muslim Salikov. And in that fight, it wasn't really like a KO loss. It was kind of like an accumulation of damage that led to him getting TKO'd. It was just it almost felt like the damage just built up too much. And I don't like seeing someone take that much damage after a KO loss, you know what I mean? And I'm worried about Andre Fialho's durability. I am. Joaquin Buckley probably would come out there and try and knock him out. And the thing is, Joaquin Buckley, I've always had a pretty bad read on him, but I actually picked his last fights correctly. I picked Curtis to beat him. I picked Imavov to beat him. I think I actually did pick Duraev to beat him, I think, but I did pick him to beat Abdul Razak Al Hassan. But the point is with Buckley, he is a guy that I don't really still have the best read on in general, which is odd. But he did outstrike Chris Curtis and arguably probably was winning that fight until he got knocked out. And then against Imavov, he lost the first 2, but he managed to have a strong third round. He was able to push it. I think if he pushes it against Andre Fialho, I think if he pressures Andre Fialho, I think he can find a KO. Andre Fialho has really good boxing, and that's kind of all he does. Andre Fialho doesn't really throw kicks. He doesn't really wrestle, and even on top of that, he doesn't really grapple. I think this is going to be a purely striking fight. I think it might even be a purely boxing fight as well, because you don't really see Joaquin Buckley throwing too many kicks. And I think if Buckley lands, he KOs Fialho. But even then, if Fialho lands, he probably KOs Buckley. So it's kind of one of those fights. But I'm picking Buckley to beat Fialho. I probably wouldn't really bet on it, but I do think Buckley probably does find the KO over Andre Fialho in this matchup. The next one is Emily Ducote versus Lupita Godinez. I'm going to sound very, very harsh in this breakdown, and that is because these two have burned me in the past. Not that I've been putting money on them, but they have been burning my picks recently. Now, Lupita Godinez did win her last fight, but you could argue she probably should have lost. I picked her to beat Angela Hill. Lupita Godinez's fight IQ in that fight was unreal, and I'm going to say the same about Ducote as well in this against the same opponent. So she loses to Angela Hill. She attempts a couple of takedowns, doesn't really get them, and then never bothers attempting takedowns again. Where she probably would have had a lot of more success in the matchup if she went for takedowns, and she didn't. Anyway, we move on to Ducote. What did Dakota do against Angela Hill? And I'm not even lying. Against Angela Hill, Emily Dakota stood in the middle of the cage and did absolutely nothing. And she just stood there like this. And she didn't throw anything. She just happily got beaten up by Angela Hill. She did nothing. There's complete opposite to her performance against Jessica Penne, where she went out there, she pressured forward, she landed volume, she threw a lot of leg kicks. Jessica Penne couldn't even walk at the end of the third round. She beat up Penne. She beat up Penne quite good, and she did a very good job about it. And even on top of that, she's got the KO over Danielle Taylor, which at the time was a very good win. She threw a head kick up there and got the KO. Now, this fight is at catch weight, 120 pounds. Both of these girls are not big for 115 pounds whatsoever, but it probably just is because Godinez is taking the fight on short notice. And I feel like Godinez might be the bigger fighter of these two, so that 120 pound catch weight, I know she's the one taking the fight on short notice, probably does benefit her more anyway. Dakota does have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I do believe Lupita Godinez probably has a pretty good belt as well. I think Godinez, the thing is, I'm seeing people say that they don't think Godinez is going to take the fight to the ground. And I think if the Godinez doesn't take this fight to the ground, I do think Dakota can outstrike her if she fights with more volume than she did against Angela Hill. I do think Emily Dakota is the better striker out of these two, but I'm gonna trust Lupita Godinez to wrestle in this matchup. I'm gonna trust Lupita Godinez to go out there and out-wrestle Emily Dakota. But also on top of that, I want you guys to both know, that both of these fighters are fighters that I had mentally planned to fade in the future. Dakota was a future fade for me, and Lupita Godinez is a future fade for me as well. And I am going to say this, and this is where I think it's going to sound harsh. I genuinely believe that Lupita Godinez is getting worse over time. I genuinely think that Lupita Godinez is getting worse at fighting. The fighter that beat Ariana Canelossi is a better fighter than the fighter that fought Cynthia Calvillo. And if you don't believe me, just watch those two performances. Lupita Godinez is getting worse. And if she is getting worse, which I think she is, she probably does lose to Cody. But it's just such a weird fight. I'm going to pick Godinez to win by decision. Just an absolute nightmare of a fight I don't really want too much to do with. I will watch it. I will be live streaming on YouTube during this event as well. But yeah, two fades for me. Two fighters that I was very willing to fade in the future. Two fighters that I was planning on fading in the future. And now they're fighting each other. So I'm going to go with Lupita Godinez. I think she's got more paths to victory as well. Now, speaking of paths to victory, Anthony Hernandez versus Edmen Shahbazyan is a fantastic stylistic matchup for Anthony Hernandez. This is like the perfect matchup for Anthony Hernandez. You know, Edmen Shahbazyan, right? What is he? A very good lights out kickboxer, very good power, can knock out anyone, well, almost anyone in the division probably in the first round on his best night. Can he knock out Anthony Hernandez in the first round? Absolutely he can. And if he did, I wouldn't be that surprised. But Anthony Hernandez has the perfect style to beat Edmen Shahbazyan. Anthony Hernandez is a constant pressure, high pace, good cardio, like solid cardio, and he'll push a high pace for 15 minutes in grappling. He will constantly work for wrestling. He'll take people down. They will work their way up. Hernandez will take them down again. They'll work their way up. Hernandez will take them down again. And he just tires out their opponent with this rinse and repeat strategy. And on top of that, he's a great grappler as well. I mean, he did actually submit Rodolfo Vieira. Although it was a gassed out Rodolfo Vieira, you've still got to credit the work that Anthony Hernandez did in that fight to make Rodolfo Vieira tired and pull off that fantastic win. Anthony Hernandez, in my opinion, is going to do that strategy to Edmen Shahbazyan. This is a nightmare matchup for Edmen Shahbazyan here. Hernandez is going to be going for takedowns. He's going to be going for takedowns consistently. And he's going to likely be getting these takedowns somewhat often as well. And on top of that, his grappling is really good, and it's much better than Shahbazyan's. And that's kind of where the nightmare matchup comes in. Edmen Shahbazyan, kind of known for having pretty bad cardio, and he also doesn't have that good grappling. Where now he's fighting a grappler with fantastic cardio, and on top of a grappler having fantastic cardio, that grappler is a fighter that fights with pace, with pressure, and his whole style is about pressuring his opponents to the point where they get tired, and then he will finish them off with a submission. I think Anthony Hernandez submits Edmen Shahbazyan in the second or the third round. I think he makes Shahbazyan tired. And also on top of that, Edmen Shahbazyan, I think if he's going to win, he's got to go out there and try and knock out Anthony Hernandez. Anthony Hernandez is hittable on the feet. He absolutely is. So Edmen Shahbazyan can absolutely find his opportunities. But even Shahbazyan, he was so much more patient against Ultra, which is a good thing than the fighter that fought, 3.5 years ago. But because he was so much more patient, that really plays into the Anthony Hernandez game plan. If Anthony Hernandez was fighting Edmen Shahbazyan, and it was the Edmen Shahbazyan that was going out there and knocking the people out in the first round and just being aggressive, yes, I would kind of think about picking against Hernandez. But if I know, or if I'm assuming that Shahbazyan's going to go out there patient, Hernandez is just going to work his wrist in and out-grapple this guy. So you've got to go with that Hernandez. I've seen people pick Shahbazyan. You're just relying on him to get a KO in the first round. If it leaves the first round, it's Hernandez's fight all day. And Hernandez has won at that point because he's did what he needed to do. He survived the first. And if he does survive the first, then he's probably at least got a couple of takedowns and probably got Edmen Shahbazyan tired. So I do like him in this matchup. The next one is the main event. And I couldn't right click to save my life, but let's get there. Let's go for Mackenzie Dern versus Angela Hill. I'm picking Mackenzie Dern. I do believe Mackenzie Dern can win this fight. I think 5 rounds absolutely favors Mackenzie Dern because she has gone 5 rounds at least once in her career anyway. I think Angela Hill has gone 5 rounds as well, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is, Mackenzie Dern, she's got 5-round experience, and I think that helps her a lot because in the 5th round against Yan Xiaonan, she showed that she did have the cardio, and she showed that she did kind of have, the will to push the fight in the 5th round to really try and dominate Yan Xiaonan in that 5th round. And if she's losing to Angela Hill on the feet, and there's still a round to go, Mackenzie Dern is still going to be live to win this fight, because that's how Angela Hill wins. The problem with Angela Hill, though, is she needs to make this fight go all 5 rounds on the feet. Because Angela Hill, I don't see her knocking out Mackenzie Dern. Angela Hill doesn't really get KOs, although she is a striker. She's a high-volume striker. She doesn't really land too much power. She doesn't really knock girls out. In fact, I don't know if she's knocked anyone out in the UFC. I could be wrong. She does have 5 KOs on her record, so she must have at some point, right? Yeah, her last KO was in 2020 over Hannah Cifers, who was pretty bad. And then she got a cut stoppage. So, yeah, last KO was over Hannah Cifers, who we know is just not UFC level at all. But anyway, the point is, Mackenzie Dern's striking is shockingly bad as well. But it is improving. She didn't look completely hopeless against Yan Xiaonan on the feet like I kind of expected her to. I did pick Yan Xiaonan to win that fight, by the way. But she didn't look absolutely hopeless like I kind of did expect her to on the feet. Her striking's getting better. Her wrestling is terrible, but it's still getting better, right? And on top of that, Angela Hill, she's so old now. She's 38 years old. She's got a lot of experience as well, that's kind of take a toll on her, probably all of the weight cuts, all of the fights over time as well. And the way that Angela Hill has to win this is she has to fight a perfect fight for 5 rounds, whereas Mackenzie Dern is so dangerous on the ground. If she gets this fight to the ground at one point in the fight, anyone picking Angela Hill is going to be worried, right? Because she's going to be so much better at grappling than Angela Hill. Angela Hill is going to want this fight to be on the feet. Or the whole fight, she's going to need it to be on the feet for 25 minutes. If Mackenzie Dern gets this fight to the ground at any point in the fight, it's her world, and she should be able to dominate from there. And I think she will be able to find a submission at some point in the matchup. So pick is Mackenzie Dern, and I do think that Mackenzie Dern wins. So giving Mackenzie Dern in this matchup, I think 5 rounds definitely favors her. And I'm interested to I'm interested to know what you guys think. And I will see you guys in the next video. I don't know for sure what it will be. I had a really good video idea that's left my mind, but yeah, I've got some videos coming up later this week. I'm going to try and still upload every day. I will be live streaming for this card on YouTube as well, a Fight Companion. And I'll just see you guys in the next one.